Tales of Stattendor, The Unlikely Company, Chapter 1, The Sword of Axanar, Part 4. Stepping out from the side street, Zander found many of the locals still browsing the market square. Life in Rycroft seemed to stop for no one. At least he thought so. Zander, a voice called out. This deep nasally voice came from among the square and startled Zander as his shoulders jolted back. From past one of the market stalls came a rather scrawny man, almost barging past a few of the locals as he drew closer. His long coat was old and was starting to fray along the seams, but he didn't care much. Zander stood still while this gentleman approached. "Oh, good to see you, Snave," Zander replied, desperate to hide the awkwardness in his voice. The odd fellow hobbled toward the young man with a limp in his left foot. Once he was close enough, he stopped, and Snave tried to catch his breath. With each wheeze he took, Snave would inhale through his mouth, revealing his crooked yellow teeth. "Are you selling your apples?" Snave inquired with anticipation. Zander nodded before unfolding the flap of his satchel. Reaching inside, he rummaged around for one of the 24 he carried within. Pulling out a stunning red apple, he presented it to Snave and watched as the scrawny fellow inspected it. Snave's eyes went wide when he saw the luscious fruit. "How many do you have?" he inquired with glee. Zander returned the apple in his hand back to his bag. "I can give you one for 2 walloons, or I can give you the whole bag for 30. What do you say?" Snave scratched his chin while pondering the offer. His brittle fingernails grinded against the chalky white skin as he thought on it. Zander stood in silence and waited for a reply. 30 sounds a little steep, Snave remarked. Zander proceeded to lift the strap from over his shoulder and slid his head out from underneath. Holding the strap firmly in one hand, Zander presented the bag to Snave single-handedly. Snave looked at the weathered satchel with confusion and a degree of disbelief. "You could always try your luck with old Tomic on his orchard," Zander replied with a cocky tone. "He will have more to offer at 3 times what I'm offering. If you would prefer that, I wish you a good day." Zander then retracted the bag from Snave, but before he could walk away, Snave hobbled into his path and stopped him. Zander could see the frustration upon his eyes. 30 walloons, or you can find apples for your cider elsewhere, Zander stated, with a coldness. Snave huffed while his nostrils flared. Reaching for a coin purse, he then presented it to Zander before taking the satchel from the young man. Zander took the purse and felt the dry leather against his fingertips and the coins within, casually counting them to ensure that they were all there. Quickly finding all 30 walloons within, Zander smiled from ear to ear. "Pleasure doing business with you," Zander remarked with satisfaction. Just before he could walk away, Snave reached out his hand and grabbed Zander by his shoulder. "Where do you think you're going? You don't expect me to carry these 30 or so apples back to my home, do you?" Zander stood silently as he looked back at Snave. "Oh, of course, I don't know what got away from me." Once again his confidence began to dissipate as reality began to sink in. Taking the satchel from Snave, he then placed it back over his shoulder as the two started to walk together. Heading eastward, Zander followed Snave as he hobbled in front of him. "A bloody cheek if you ask me," Snave muttered under his breath. As the two continued to walk on, Zander fell silent. Following Snave further from the marketplace, he came to another back street. Here the path was not so narrow, but the houses either side were not as nicely presented. "Snave," Zander broke his silence by asking, "how much do you know about the saltwood?" Hobbling along, Snave remained quiet as he thought to himself. Just as they made it to the end of the street, he then stopped and looked to Zander. "Well," he said as he gathered his thoughts, When I was growing up here, I remember all the stories. You know, the ones about the mighty king, Arthur's pen cavern, in the woods, or something or other. I know that he died defending the kingdom against an invasion of orcs or goblins or something of the sort. Can't remember what it was really. But I know that when he died, they made a great tomb for him somewhere in those woods. And all the trees, after he was buried, according to the stories, they all started acting differently. The saltwood started to change, and according to some, you could barely find your way in or out of the forest. But, as I said, I hardly remembered the stories. All I know is that those people who go in, not too many come back out again. Hence a lot of people tend to avoid the saltwood, if you ask me. Folks only be going into the saltwood if they're looking for firewood or they're desperate to hunt. Occasionally, now and again, we get the odd adventurer or adventurers seeking to make a name for themselves. Everyone round here knows that the only reason people go into the saltwood is for one thing and one thing only. They're looking for his tomb. Fancy that. Some adventurer from God's nowhere coming here looking for the tomb of Arthur's pen cavern, and not only that, they go looking for his sword, the one that was buried with him. The sword of something or other, I can't remember what it was called, but I know that the only reason people go into the saltwood is to find that sword. It's a thing of legend if you ask me. But it's just a story really. I think it's mostly that the forest is so big and so large, people get lost in there. So I wouldn't be too surprised if anyone went in there and they got lost for a while. People also say that when they go into the saltwoods they never come back out again. I'm not too sure about that myself if you ask me. I think it's the ones that do go in, if they do come back out again, well, they don't like to talk much about it. Mostly because it's embarrassing. Imagine raising all that coin just to go on some expedition to find nothing. Bloody foolish if you ask me. So that's what I have to say about the saltwood. Why do you ask anyway? Xander's eyes began to dart from side to side, then all around in every direction. Oh, I only just, well... He fumbled his words as he tried to think of a decent response. I just thought of it because I heard some adventurers passing through, and they were thinking of going into the saltwood, and well, I was just curious to see what old Snave had to say about it. Of course, Snave pointed his finger towards Zander and pressed it into the young man's chest. You mark my words, Zander. Anyone who goes into the saltwood, well, they're either foolish or too stubborn to listen to reason, if you ask me. Now, you best help me with this bag, and you best bring 'em back to my house. I've got an order that needs filling, and you best make sure them apples be looking their best. You understand? That's all you gotta worry about. Don't be worrying about no adventurers going off into the saltwood looking for fortunes or fame, or whatever it is those adventurers look for. With every fibre of his being, Zander desperately tried to suppress his smirk. Oh, of course. As Snave continued on his way, he hobbled along the road while Zander followed behind him at a casual pace, ensuring that he didn't overtake the pious and proud man. If you've enjoyed our work, please consider supporting us on Patreon. Every subscriber will gain early access to upcoming episodes, early access to upcoming comic books, and additional content such as short stories and novels and novellas. So subscribe and stay tuned for more episodes of Tales of Stattendor, the Unlikely Company.